Last week, the White House announced new defensive military deployments to help Israel defend itself against Iran and its proxies. Joining me now is Florida Congressman Cory Mills. He's a member of the House Armed Services and Foreign Affairs Committees. And Congressman, I know and remember well that you traveled to Israel right after the October 7th attack to help bring Americans back home. What is your reaction to this escalation this morning?
Well, again, I think that when you're watching Russia send in IL-76s, and these IL-76s are typically used for heavy weapons type of logistics, and we have been seeing a large number of those going into Tehran and into other locations, that they are certainly preparing for something that has a larger scale attack. I think that you have to go back to the successful counterterrorism strike of Qasem Soleimani, which also resulted in the death of a known terrorist militia organizer named Abu Mahdi al-Mohandes. This individual was directly connected in to the General Secretary Hassan Nasrallah, who is the head of Lebanon's Hezbollah. And when you talk about the impacts of killing the former head of Hezbollah and the number two, then you're going to expect there's going to be some type of retaliatory save face that has to go on by Iran, very similar to the 20-plus rockets that they launched under President Trump, where Trump had to actually tell him that if you kill even a single American, that you can guarantee that, I will have an appropriate response. So we are going to see, in my opinion, I think an attack as early as today. I do believe Secretary Blinken is correct. I think how we continue to levy the Abraham Accords allies as well as for others in order to try and broker agreements, and how we can actually go ahead and ensure the defense of Israel is going to be very key here. But we have to understand Israel has a right to defend itself. Israel has a right to go after these Iranian militias like Hamas, like Hezbollah, like Kataib Hezbollah of Iraq, and also of the Houthis that are disrupting 12% of global trade. Iran, at the end of the day, is the ultimate terrorist organization, and we have to start understanding the Iranian regime under the Ayatollah, not the Iranian people, are actually responsible for this.
Well, and at what point does the Biden-Harris administration ramp up the rhetoric and get tougher on Iran? Some argue that those sanctions have not been effective and have not been enough.
Well, because they haven't imposed those sanctions, and that's the biggest problem. Iran's primary funding has come from the increase in oil exportation to China, which stopped under President Trump. Iran was at the verge of collapse economically under President Trump, but under the Biden-Harris regime, they've allowed Iran to have more economic growth than they've ever had in their lives. And so this is weakness inviting aggression and funding by the Biden-Harris campaign to have an inability to hold Iran accountable.
Yeah, I do want to ask you about Russia. This axis of evil continues to be a top story. So Russia sped up the prisoner swap with the U.S. after it became clear that former President Trump could return to the White House. That's according to a new report in the Wall Street Journal. I want you to listen to Vice President Kamala Harris talking about that prisoner swap. Watch.
This is just an extraordinary testament to the importance of having a president who understands the power of diplomacy and understands the strength that rests in understanding the significance of diplomacy and strengthening alliances.
So she was off script, Congressman. Your reaction?
Well, it is unburdening what has been done. Another one of these word salads by Kamala Harris. But look, here's the bottom line. I'm extremely happy that we've gotten the prisoner exchange that's allowed us to get Americans back. I, of all people, understand the significant importance of getting Americans back home, having traveled to Afghanistan to conduct the first successful airline rescue, having rescued 255 Americans out of Israel, having rescued 23 Americans out of Haiti. I understand, but what has not come forward yet is the details of the trade. What exactly in its entirety have we given up in an effort to try and do so? And so I want to look at, the fact that what you heard from Vladimir Putin is that when President Trump talked about ending the war in Ukraine, you heard Vladimir Putin say that I don't know exactly the details of how he would do it, but I know that he's serious whenever he says it. And so that's the respect that we need on the world stage, not the word salad from Kamala Harris or this failed regime that we see under Biden.
I do want to ask you about the investigation into the assassination attempt at former President Trump. Secret Service Director Ronald Rowe held a press conference on that assassination attempt. This is back on Friday. He once again took full responsibility for the shooting, but he insisted the agency did not know the shooter had a gun until after he opened fire, and that he admitted that the Secret Service has not interviewed any local law enforcement or the local snipers. He also denied a whistleblower's claim that he personally directed cuts to the Counter Surveillance Division. We've got this new AP Nordic Center poll that finds 50% of the U.S. Adults anyway say that political division is responsible for what happened in Butler. 43% blame the Secret Service. You were left off the bipartisan task force, which is investigating the assassination attempt. But you have experience in the military. If I'm not mistaken, weren't you a sniper yourself? What is your take on that?
Yeah, I ran sniper counter sniper teams with the Department of State doing this very thing, which is looking at advances and oversight for different types of foreign dignitaries as well as for our own state leaders. And I can tell you that having gone out to Butler, PA, having sat in both positions of the counter sniper teams, having laid exactly where Thomas Crooks took his shot, when you're looking and compiling all your evidence, the fear that I have now is that we're going to get to a point very soon in my independent investigation with Congressman Eli Crane, Andy Biggs, Chip Roy, and others, is that it's going to be indistinguishable between what is gross negligence and what is purposeful intent. I can tell you that the Secret Service did not attend the morning meeting that would have helped with communication relays. They did not actually have a full presidential package. They had refused the drone surveillance offerings by the local law enforcement, which that has still not come to the reason why. But this entire venue as a whole had multiple buildings that you could have shot from that was unprotected and was not being properly monitored. And I'm sorry, but I don't believe that they only knew about the rifle or the weapon system whenever it was fired, when there was multiple suspicion activities that was given, multiple photos that was given, not to mention you have a 9 to 12-inch silhouette that sticks out from the Thomas Crooks building that was very visibly seen by the counter snipers, because I sat in that position and saw it for myself. So I'm going to continue my independent investigation. It's my understanding that the task force has not even had a conference call or meeting, so I'm not sure what they're doing at this time. But I can tell you that we're going to get transparency and accountability, because people need to ensure the safety of our nominee and our future president, as well as other elected officials, to guarantee this doesn't happen again. But we also have to acknowledge DEI. This means doesn't earn it, doesn't need to be applicable when it comes to protections of American citizens, whether it's our military or otherwise. So I look at DEI equals DIE.
Okay. Real quick before you go, I've only got about 20 seconds, but Hurricane Debby just made landfall off the west coast of Florida. Just a quick reaction. How concerned are you about your district?
Well, it's storming here right now. Actually, right when they called me, I had already lost some of our connection, but I can tell you that the tremendous amount of rain and the fact that this storm may slow down is a real concern. But we have a great governor. We have a great CFO who understands how to deal with this. And, you know, Florida's not unaccustomed to these types of storms, but I just want everyone to take the precautions necessary to stay safe and watch for falling debris and other things around your area.
Congressman Cory Mills, thank you so much for joining us this morning. We're glad that your connection stayed.
Thank you.
At least to join us for this interview. Thank you, sir.